Do the Russian sleep experiment. Oh my goodness, this one is so creepy. I first heard about this when I was in high school and it scarred me for life. In the late 1940s, Russian researchers kept 5 prisoners locked in a room to do an experiment on them. They were going to be testing out a new chemical gas on these prisoners. The gas was a stimulant meant to keep people awake. The 5 prisoners were promised to be released from prison if they went through with this experiment and if they stayed awake for the 15 days. The researchers were going to be monitoring them by looking through porthole windows attached to the chambers and with microphones. And there was enough food in the chamber to keep all 5 of the prisoners eating for a month straight. They began pumping the gas into the chamber and everything was fine until 5 days later when things started to get a little bit weird. The prisoners began to talk to each other about traumatic, graphic events from their past, and their conversations kept getting darker and more disturbing. The prisoners started to display severe paranoia. Follow for part 2. Part 2 of the Russian sleep experiment. So after 5 days, their conversations started taking a dark turn. Then they stopped talking to each other and started whispering into the microphones. On the 9th day, one of them started screaming and running around the chamber. He was screaming so much that he busted out his vocal cords and he could no longer scream, he could just squeak. Soon after this, another one started screaming the exact same way. 2 more prisoners who weren't screaming took some books that were provided for them in the chamber, ripped out the pages, and glued them onto the windows using their feces. After the windows were completely covered, all of the screaming and whispering stopped. 3 more days passed and still no noise was coming from the chamber, and at this point the researchers didn't even know if the prisoners were alive anymore. The researchers decided to use the intercom to tell the prisoners that they were going to open the chamber and that the prisoners would be released if they complied. What the prisoners said next will terrify you. Follow for part 3. Part 3 of the Russian sleep experiment. So after the researchers told the prisoners over the intercom that they would be freed if they complied, one of the prisoners got on the microphone and he said in a very calm voice, "We no longer wish to be freed." The researchers decided that they would open the chamber after all. Before they could go into the chamber, they had to drain it of all of the gas. And as soon as they started doing this, the prisoners started screaming, begging for them to turn the gas back on. They were screaming bloody murder, begging for the gas. When the researchers finally went in to get the prisoners, they noticed that one of them was dead and the other 4 had their organs torn out. The worst part was, it was apparent that they had done it to themselves, using only their hands. Yet they were somehow still alive and they just kept begging for the gas to be turned back on. And this isn't even the end of the story. Follow for part 4. Part 4 of the Russian sleep experiment. So the researchers got the subjects out of the chamber and they took them to a hospital where they underwent surgery. The ones that could still sleep just kept asking the doctors for gas. The doctors decided not to give them any laughing gas or anesthesia for the surgeries, so they had to do the surgeries on them when they were awake. But the weird thing was, it seemed as though the prisoners enjoyed it. One of the prisoners who could no longer speak was given a notepad and pen during the surgery, and he scribbled down, "Keep cutting." As soon as one of the prisoners fell asleep, he flatlined and he died. Soon there was only one prisoner that was left, and right before he passed away, he looked at the doctor and he said, "We are the darkness that lurks within all of you. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven that we cannot tread." And then his EKG flatlined and the experiment was over.
I used to scam people by pretending I was a blind pianist. So I didn't know what to do when my sister came in, dragging her dead husband past me. You keep playing because... Sarah, stop! I yelled as I followed my girlfriend around at the mall. I don't know why she was there. The last time I saw her was when I buried her. Me and my friends looked at the mirror. They were smiling as we left the room. I banged from the inside of the mirror. That's not me. My son was making weird faces at the room where my late father, himself. He said that he was copying the floating man in the room. My name is Julian. While I was cleaning the kitchen with my mom, my little brother shouted, "Julian, no!" While he fell down the stairs, my mom turned her eyes upon me. Sarah comes over to my house. We were having fun. A minute later, I received a text that says, "I can't come over today, I'm sorry." It's from Sarah. No!
This man kills people who simply look at him and you won't believe why.
You're not gonna need a part 2. So basically, this is Nico Jenkins. Nico was born in Colorado in 1986 to a family that was notoriously violent. At the age of 7, he brought a gun to school, and at the age of 15, he stole a car and went to jail. In prison, he was notoriously violent and he would often assault other inmates, but he was finally released in 2013. This is when he went from being a normal criminal to being one of the most dangerous people alive. 2 weeks after he was released from prison, a police officer in Omaha, Nebraska found 2 dead men in the back of a pickup truck. Over the next week, 2 other people were murdered around the same area, notably Andrea Kruger. Andrea was driving home from work when somebody stopped her and shot her in the middle of the street and then abandoned her car down the highway. This is how Nico got caught, because he got sloppy and left DNA evidence in the car and failed to burn it. All of his victims were chosen seemingly at random because all but one of them had no connection to Nico at all. While he was in trial, he claimed he was being guided by the Egyptian serpent god Apophis, but that did not stop him from getting 4 death sentences. And now, you're not gonna need a part 2.
Scary Things You Say Part 23. My son said to me, remember when I was Uncle Maury? That was my brother. His name was Maury. He died when he was 33 and my son was born 5 years later. When I was little, over a year old, my mom was walking down the stairs. I told her, be careful, mommy. That's how my husband died. What the heck? Babies know everything. I was 5. I found it out because my little brother talked to me, but no one believes me. He said, I know your pain. I was screaming. My son was 3.5 years when he told me how much I was crying for a baby. He'd say, God told me to wait because it wasn't my time. This is so I find it fascinating, actually, not scary. Mine asks why the little boy that lives with us is always sad. I had a miscarriage prior to having him. Oh, this is so sad. My 6-year-old niece once asked, where were we before we were here?
Okay, so let's talk about the supposed vampires that live in New Orleans. Locals believe that the city is actually home to real living vampires. During the 1930s, brothers John and Wayne Carter were executed for committing multiple murders. About a dozen bodies were found, drained of their blood, after a young woman managed to escape the brothers' apartment. Sightings of these brothers are reported up until this very day because their bodies mysteriously vanished from the funeral vault. Why am I thinking of Stefan and Damon right now? Now fast forward to 1984, where 9 people were found around the French Quarter area, all with their throats ripped out. Paramedics and first responders were dumbfounded because even though the scene was gory, there was no blood. Also, vampire culture is majorly popular in New Orleans, but that must have stemmed from somewhere. The missing persons and crime rate is incredibly high around the French Quarter area. What if this is something more?
Oh! That's a fucking slug!
Imagine that in someone's fucking brain.
Do not mess with that friggin' kid! If you do, I'll rip off your goddamn head and shove it so far up your friggin' ass, you'll be coughing up dandruff for 4 frickin' months!
Look, I don't care what you say. If you ever touch him again, I will freaking kill you. I'm gonna pull out a goddamn shotgun and blow your damn head off. Do you understand, you little worthless piece of crap?
Please do Cat Scratch. I actually used to play this game with my sisters all the time when we were younger, and most of the time it actually worked. So Cat Scratch is a paranormal game which basically you're supposed to summon some sort of spirit to scratch you along your back. To play the game you need at least 2 people, so one person sits crisscross applesauce and the other person lays their head in that person's lap. The person who's sitting up then starts rubbing the other person's temples and telling them one of the Cat Scratch stories. There are a few different variations of stories that go along with this game, but I'll tell you the most popular one. So the story goes like, there was once an old lady who owned a cat. The cat was very nice. It would meow and purr. One day the cat got hit by a car and died. Cat scratch, cat scratch, cat scratch. The old lady got a new cat. This cat was very mean. It hissed and clawed. Cat scratch, cat scratch, cat scratch. I'm running out of time, but follow for part 2.
This is the dark truth behind the Lion King. So we all remember this scene when Mufasa dies, right? Simba then later finds his dead body, but they never actually showed what happened to the body. You would think the hyenas ate it, But hyenas don't actually touch lions. And there is no other animal that eats lions besides lions themselves. But here's when it gets crazy. Now look at this picture of Scar. He is playing with some animal's skull, which just happens to look exactly like a lion's skull. So does this mean that Scar ate his own brother's dead body?
2 cosmetic companies that got sued. Number 1, EOS Lip Balm. In 2016, the brand came under attack when a story surfaced of a customer reaction lawsuit. Many people reported blistering, cracked, bleeding lips, which was actually caused by a chemical reaction within the ingredients. 2 years later, EOS settled the lawsuit. Number 2, Johnson & Johnson. In 2018, Johnson & Johnson was ordered to pay $4.7 billion in damages to 22 women. The women alleged that the baby powder they were using was contaminated with asbestos, which led them to have ovarian cancer. To this day, Johnson & Johnson is still facing over 16,000 US legal cases. Let me know if you want me to make this a series.
There is a new planet exactly the same as Earth. This planet is the same size and looks identical to Earth. As you guys can see, they're both identical. And there could be humans on this planet. Scientists are trying to get to the planet and trying to discover what is on it. There could be humans or even aliens on this other world, because it's identical to our Earth. Make sure you share this message with everyone and follow me.
If you see this happen, you need to run fast. If you see these orange dots on a tree in the woods, you seriously need to run fast. It might just look like orange paint, but don't be fooled. This is a trap. There have been loads of reports of missing people in these types of woods. So if you see these orange markings in the woods, you need to run fast. Make sure you share this message and follow for more.